Our story begins in a poorly heated office in downtown.
We don't have time for meta introductions. We have a crisis on our hands.
Oh God, what is it this time?
Nothing you cover is popular enough. People don't care whether or not a game is good. They only care if it's popular.
That doesn't make any sense.
I've been reading reviews on GameFAQs and noticed that nothing you cover makes their 5 gold star rating.
I don't think GameFAQs has a gold star rating. Did they even do reviews?
Popularity is what matters, boys. That's where the good money is, and that's what you need to cover. Get it done.
Well, shit.
Hello? Look! Hey! Listen! Watch out! Hey! Hey! Listen! Hello? Hey! Look! Hey! Hey! Listen! Hello? Hey! Hey! Listen!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 19 of the Retro Odyssey podcast. God knows I've been going this long, but we're still going. I am your host, Adam, as always, and I'm joined by Matt, Ryan, and Stephen. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
How you all doing?
Not too bad.
What have you been up to recently? Anything? Nothing?
Me personally, I've been getting back into The Binding of Isaac a little bit, trying to get some of the hard mode achievements knocked out. I've been spending a bit of time on that.
How many achievements have you got left?
Oh God, I've not counted. Each character has kind of like a post-it note, which has got like different icons on it, and by completing different modes in the game with each character, it kind of like adds things to this post-it note. I've not counted how much is actually left, but I'm getting there. I'm filling in the post-it notes.
So I take it takes a fair while to 100% that game?
Oh God, yeah.
Alright, I've only played like a bit of Binding of Isaac, like the original version, not the... Is it Rebirth, you say?
Afterbirth, this one.
Afterbirth.
Yeah, there's Rebirth, then Afterbirth.
Wasn't there like Afterbirth Plus as well?
Yeah,
Afterbirth Plus, yeah.
Yeah.
I only
And
played
there
like
is-
the original one back when it came out, and it was fine. But it wasn't really enough to kind of hook me.
There is another expansion on its way as well.
Cool.
Is this going to be Binding of Isaac Unbirth?
I have no idea what it's going to be called.
Are they
Definitely.
gonna release it as DLC on Switch, or?
I'm not sure. I know it's going to be coming to PC, but I'm outside of that. I'm not sure.
They'll just release it as another $30 game. They're just taking the Street Fighter route.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the expansions to the game so far have been fairly affordable. I think Afterbirth Plus was about £15-16.
Yeah, I mean, Afterbirth Plus was the only version on the Switch, so that's why I'm curious if they're gonna do DLC or just re-release it as a newer version.
Nah, I'm sure it'll be DLC.
Cool. And what about you guys? What have you been up to recently?
I've mostly been playing a lot of Diablo.
Diablo on the Switch, or...
So I've been playing a lot of all 3 of them, and, split between PC, Xbox One, Switch, mostly because I'm doing a lot of recording for my YouTube videos.
Alright, cool. Which is your favourite out of the trilogy?
Diablo 2 is the one I've played the most. I haven't gotten all the way through 3 yet, but there are things I enjoy about all of them.
Cool. I've never actually played a Diablo game, but I'm not entirely sure they're my cup of tea. I kind of like the logo, but then when I see the gameplay footage, I just kind of think I'm not going to enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to play it at some point, because I'm going to work it into one of these.
Stick it on the list. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not like a lot of the things we've covered.
Yeah.
I've played 2 and 3, and I've enjoyed both of them.
Alright. I'll be interested to give them a shot at least. What about you, Ryan?
Just doing a lot of Minecraft recently, and also got back into Smash when they released Hero.
Not touched any of the DLC, to be honest. Like, none of the DLC characters interest me. I mean, I'll pick up Banjo-Kazooie when it comes out, but...
I'll say that Hero is probably the best Ditto fight you can have. His spell list is so ridiculous as to what can happen. Like, he has a spell, it's been super controversial apparently, called Thwack. And it can potentially kill someone at 0. It doesn't launch them, it just takes their stock.
All right.
Maybe. Yeah. He also just got banned in Australia from tournament play for a couple reasons.
Yeah, but like it seems that this is going to be the case with all the DLC, because they said the same about Piranha when it came out. Then they said the same about Joker, and now Hero. It kind of feels like people are going to say, "Oh, it's broken," until they learn like all the ins and outs of it, and then like, okay, maybe not.
Well, I guess there's
to counter him.
I guess there's a couple reasons for the tournament ban, and one of them is his list is so vast, it begins to take a bit of the competitive out because it starts feeling like he just has access to items, which are usually banned in tournament play. But a real, actual, true issue is that foreign players can't read the command list.
Oh.
If you have someone who doesn't speak or read English and they're playing in an English tourney and they pull up his spell list, it's gibberish.
Interesting.
Okay.
And that's actually kind of a legitimate concern, and I don't know how they'll get around that. I don't know if Nintendo will actually take that into consideration, because they're kind of back and forth on the acceptance of tournament play. Like, they're like, oh yeah, competitive play is a thing. But, like, how serious are they actually?
Well, I'm not sure, because I mean, like, I think I remember Sakurai was like, he didn't really want Smash to be a competitive thing. I mean, Nintendo probably have different ideas, but I don't know, it's a weird one. It sort of reminds me as well, that ban, about the, did you hear about the Pokemon trading card game?
No. I mean, I've heard of it before.
It's
just a fad, though.
Yeah. They banned a Pokemon card recently for the first time.
Really?
And it's a similar reason. There's actually a card called, I think it's Blaine's Quiz or something. So what you do is you say the name of a move on your card to the opponent, and then if they get it right, they draw a card, and if you get it right, you draw a card or something. But obviously the moves have different names because of the languages, and even the translation isn't necessarily correct because sometimes it's not directly translated. So obviously it would mean that this card would be like really difficult for, people who speak a different language.
Interesting.
Which I thought was quite interesting because, one, it sounds like a fantastic idea for a card that you just quiz in your opponent on movesets, but also it makes complete sense that they banned it.
That is very interesting. Yeah, I never got into the Pokemon card game.
I always wanted to, but one of the things that prevented me was, the money involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a very cheap thing. I really like the cards, and when I was a child, I used to collect the cards. And, just get them randomly and stuff like that. But I never used to play the game. But I was always interested in playing the game because I played a bit of the Game Boy trading card game, and it seemed pretty fun.
I forgot that was a thing.
It is, and it's fantastic.
I have a friend who has literal binders full of Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
And basically super well conditioned to actually mint.
All right, cool.
Like, he probably has $7,000-8,000 worth of Pokemon cards at this point.
Shit. They're pretty cool, though. I mean, like, I really like the artwork on a lot of them.
Including Fat Pikachu.
Including Fat Pikachu. Well, I mean, for me, I've been continuing with Mario Maker, mostly. I've currently hit, I think, about 215 hours in total on that game, so way more than, like, any other game I've played, including, like, Breath of the Wild, which I, completed. So, yeah, I'm enjoying that game quite a fair bit. But I've also been getting pretty deep into the Turok 2 remaster, which got released recently on the Switch. It's really good. I played the original Turok 2 back on the N64, but I didn't have a good time with it. Like, the frame rate is, like, single digits, and it's really obtuse. And the remaster kind of fixes that, because you've got this, smooth 60 frames per second frame rate, but then you've got, like, objective markers. You've got things like you can grab onto ledges, so, there's no kind of difficult platforming or anything. Everything's sort of within reach. They've even changed the layout. Like, for example, the level I've just done, Lair of the Blind Ones, it's a complete maze in the original. You can't tell where you're going because everything looks the same. But they've actually changed the look of it and the layout of it so that it's actually, easier to navigate. And in fact, that level has become my favourite, at least, of the ones I've played so far. It's a really good remaster, and the combat and the weapons are just fantastic.
Limited run, they just opened up pre-orders on physical editions of Turok 1 and 2 for the Switch. I was considering going after it, but then also, like, the day before pre-order opened up, Microsoft announced a Xbox One X Gears 5 edition.
So your money went elsewhere.
So I'm just like, well, I'm saving that $60 on those games. I'm going to put that towards a Gear 5 Xbox. I was hoping, really hoping that they weren't going to do it. That they weren't going to make a Gears 5 edition. Because
you knew you'd buy it.
I knew I would buy it. I have a Gears 3 360. I have a Gears 4 Xbox One S. It's one of my favorite game franchises, I guess. Is series franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to get into those at some point.
It's so good. Gears 2 is so good.
You see, like, I really liked the first one. And the second one, I liked the campaign, but hated the multiplayer. And then Gears 3, I was just kind of indifferent with a lot of it. And I've not played the others.
Horde mode in Gears 2 was a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, but then, like, the actual multiplayer,
I never got...
Like, I didn't like the maps.
I never really got heavily into multiplayer in the Gears games.
Well, the thing is, they sort of nerfed the weapons as well, and what I liked about Gears 1 is that every weapon sort of had its function and was sort of overpowered in its own way. And then, like, in Gears 2, they thought, oh, okay, we can't be having, like, a really powerful shotgun or a handgun that decapitates people easy. Let's just make all the weapons shit. And then it just kind of ruined the fun. And then I didn't like the maps as much either. And like I played Gears 2 multiplayer for a bit and I just went off it. But like Gears 1, I was hooked on the multiplayer when it came out.
Well, it's like, I want to say it was, it might have been Gears 2, might have been Gears 1, where there was just sort of when teams came down to a last man standing, it was sort of a universal known that you get into a Nasher duel, which is getting like 10, 15 feet apart or away from the other person and then just sort of strafing in a circle, blasting away with Nashers until one of you went down.
Nice.
It's just that's what happened. And not doing that was dishonorable.
But yeah, I mean, they're alright. I'll say I kind of went off them, to be honest. I didn't play 4 and 5, so I don't know what they're like. Oh, they did another one as well. Didn't they do like a prequel or something?
Judgment came out on the 360, and they unnecessarily changed up some of the controls because it was actually done by Sky High Entertainment, something like that. They switched up some of the controls. The story was kind of disconnected. It was more of a prequel to stuff, and honestly, it was more of a cash grab. It wasn't bad. It's just completely 100% skippable. You don't need to play it. They don't tell you anything that the other games don't tell you.
So it's basically there for people who want a bit more of a Gears fix, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's literally what it was. They're like, oh, people will buy this because it's Gears, and it worked. But it was like, I could have done without.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got fed up with the series, I'd say, by the third one. I don't know why. They're not bad games. By the third one, I just wasn't enjoying the single player at all.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I remember the first one. I definitely had a great time with it.
But yeah, that's where my next $500 is going, apparently.
Nice.
Thanks, Microsoft.
I've never actually played them. I've got the first 3, but
yeah, I mean, like I said, the first and second are pretty good in single player. The third's probably all right too, but I just got.
If you could find someone to run through with shoot, I mean, I'll do it. I'll run through the Gears games with you co-op. It's a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I played them in co-op. They're pretty good.
I mean, from what I understand, you basically have to play some of them in co-op, otherwise your AI partner is worthless?
I mean, in the first one, your AI partner is basically worthless. They're much more helpful in the later games. Plus, I believe, if I remember correctly, in the first Gears, if you go down, you can be picked up by a human player.
Yeah.
But if you go down and sit like straight up single player, you die. Your AI partners will not pick you up. It's over. But then when you get into like Gears 3, you actually have an issue where the game scales up the difficulty for more people. So like the final boss of Gears 3 is damn near impossible in co-op.
Ah, okay.
But playing it single player, it's a breeze. Like, me and my brother tried forever to kill Mira in co-op. Then we like split and went and killed him. Both of us killed her like first try, solo. So yeah, it's not particularly balanced in some situations, which is really bizarre.
You know what I think was my problem with Gears 3, thinking about it? Is that by the time Gears 3 rolled around, like, those kind of cover shooters were just all the fucking
They
time.
were everywhere.
Yeah, so I think I probably just got sick of sitting behind cover and popping shots out by that point, because it was like almost every game by that point.
Well, it's like Yahtzee said something about he describes them as third-person shooters where the battlefield is littered with chest-high walls.
That was one of my beefs with the later Mass Effect games. It's like, oh, here's the firefight room.
Yep, we know what's going on.
Yeah. All right. Well, now we've gone over, what we've all been playing and doing recently. We'll take a little bit of a break and we'll jump straight into the news.
I'll buy it at a high price.
Right. So, time for this month's news segment. Matt, I'm going to pass over to you. What news have we got in store this month?
First off, in retro news, Square have announced a release date for Final Fantasy VIII, the HD version, whatever you want to call it.
Scheduled for September 3rd. Honestly, at this point, I don't think there's any reason to doubt that, because it looks like it's pretty much done.
The 3rd is like around the corner, so
yeah,
if it's done by now, then
2 weeks away.
Yeah.
So this is basically Final Fantasy VIII getting the ports that 7 and 9 did on the PS4 and then later Switch, where it adds the extra functions of being able to speed up the game 3 times, being able to turn off enemy encounters, and being able to do the battle assist where it fills up all your meters. The other notable thing is obviously the graphics have been improved to make it HD compatible, and interestingly enough, they put new character models in. So the character models are actually completely new for this version, which I don't know that they did on the others.
Final Fantasy is my favorite video game series, so it'll definitely be on my...
You are full of shit.
Yeah, and there's other functions that have been added to the Steam version, mostly being able to max out things, have all the items, have all the abilities, etc. It's nice to see Final Fantasy VIII being re-released in a more friendly format, as opposed to just the one physical copy.
The only thing I really know about Final Fantasy VIII is Eden, because Eden crops up again in Final Fantasy XIV.
Well, Gunblades.
Recently. Gunblades as well. We've just had Gunbreaker added as a class in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah. I'm still a little disappointed because I prefer the Gunblades in 13 to the Gunblade in 8.
Either way, though, it's still cool. It's a gun with a blade on it.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to a guy I know. Apparently the Gunblade doesn't shoot bullets?
No, it uses magic energy and
to
fires
make
off
the blade
that.
more hurt.
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense, but you know what? Final Fantasy doesn't make any sense, so...
Yeah. One of the interesting things they did with 8 was when you attacked with a gunblade, and of course, only the one character has gunblades, well, the one playable character. When you attacked with the gunblade, you could actually press the R1 button at the right moment, and you would get extra damage on top of it, and you get the little explosions coming out to show that you got it.
Yeah, because like you're pulling the trigger at the right time, and then it makes extra magic in the sword or something stupid that I love about it.
Yeah, and I think that partially influenced one of the mechanics in Legend of Dragoon, where you have timed button presses to make your attack chain longer and do more damage.
Well, honestly, that happened in Super Mario RPG.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Super Mario RPG, it's an active combat system, well, semi-active combat system, where pressing buttons at certain times, like Mario has a super jump, where he can get, if you're good on your timing, instead of jumping on him once, you can get like 5, 6, 7 jumps on him. If you press a button at the right time, it's been a while, I believe you can boost your defense. Almost every single weapon has like a second hit or a damage buff.
Interesting.
It's something they experimented with before, and it makes the game a lot more interesting.
Yeah, so I think Dragoon was probably pulling more from that, especially because it came out, at the end of the same year that 8 came out. But that is interesting.
Yeah, no, if you haven't played Super Mario RPG, I highly recommend it. It's one of the few RPGs that I really like.
Yeah, it is definitely on my list. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not into RPGs, as you may have gathered by now, but I need to play Super Mario RPG at one point. That was on the SNES, right?
Yes.
I imagine that when they finally get around to releasing SNES games on the Switch Online, it'll probably come out there, so I'll probably wait until that.
And it was on the SNES Mini too, so if you had that one,
yeah,
you got it there as well.
Oh, it was Paper Mario that was on the N64, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so the next news topic is the re-release of Doom 1, 2, and 3 on the Switch and other consoles, which kind of came out of nowhere. It just like suddenly appeared, and there was a little controversy at the start with you having to register a Bethesda account to play Doom, but they have since taken that out, so apparently they did that as a mistake. But yeah, they are now out and available.
I mean, in fairness, part of me thinks maybe it was a mistake because Bethesda recently have been extremely incompetent. But part of me also thinks Bethesda have also been very greedy recently, so maybe it's just them being dicks. Could be either. But either way, it's gone now, so that's a good thing. The ports themselves are sort of strange. I mean, I know that, Matt, you looked at the video footage of, was it the original Doom, and you noticed straight away?
There are a couple issues. The music plays slightly slower. If you're not like overly familiar with the music, you're not even going to notice, but it is slightly slower. And
yeah, I mean, I played Doom quite a fair amount. Nowhere near as much as you, like, of course, because you're like the Doom guy. But I didn't notice anything, but then for you, it was really obvious. So I imagine that the more familiar you are with Doom, the more likely it's going to bother you.
Another issue it has is the aspect ratio is slightly off. Stuff looks a little bit squished, more than it should do, which is a shame, really. So it's not quite... I mean, you would think for a 25-year-old game they would, like...
It'd be easy.
Yeah, but they are still having issues.
They have, like, HD versions from the BFG releases and the XBLA releases.
Yeah, and those versions were fine. Like I said, if you're not overly familiar with Doom, you're probably not even going to notice, but you are better off playing other versions if you are a Doom veteran until they fix this stuff.
A Doom aficionado such as yourself.
Yeah. I mean, if you do want to play it on your Switch, it is like only a few quid and it's still pretty good. I mean, both those issues, I would say, probably aren't that noticeable unless you're like a big Doom guy.
I see what you did there.
Exactly. And honestly, I can see both these things being patchable. Like, they both seem like something Bethesda could fix. Whether they will or not's another thing, because they don't really like fixing their messes of games. But yeah, I mean, I would say I've like played a little bit of it and I've had a good time. The Doom 3 port is actually pretty good from what I can tell. Like, I don't seem to have noticed any issues with that at all. But Panic Button did that port, so obviously they did a good job with it. But yeah, I mean, like, the ports are okay. Judging by the price, I'd say it's definitely worth the price. I mean, I suppose for these kind of games, you can probably still pick them up for cheaper, but I mean, comparatively, it's still pretty cheap for what they are. And they're still really good games.
If you do want to play them on console, that is kind of like still a decent buy for you. If you are like really, really into Doom, you're probably playing it on PC anyway.
Yeah,
So this probably isn't really aimed at you.
It's disappointing to see because, as you said, Doom is like old as the hills. So they shouldn't really be having any problems at this point, especially because they have like HD versions of it already. So they wouldn't really need to do anything more than just do a direct port of those, surely.
It's not down to a bad performance issue. It's down to a bad port.
Yeah,
it still performs well.
Ports of it, like good. There are good HD ports of it, and that confuses me because, again, they can just transfer that straight over, surely, and then just alter the control scheme. I don't know. Either way, I think the problem is Bethesda are just kind of lazy these days. I'm just kind of thankful for what we've got, to be honest. Like, I wanted the original Doom on the Switch, and I got it. Not perfect, but for me, it's good enough.
I'm mostly hoping this doesn't roll over into Doom Eternal being bad.
Well, the early reports about it seem to be relatively promising. So I think the game's going to be good. It's just whether or not they had, like, bullshit microtransactions and stuff, like with Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
Right.
But remains to be seen. I'm optimistic, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm holding out on pre-ordering it for that very issue.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, there's probably no point in pre-ordering it because, just wait until the reviews to see whether or not it's got the bullshit in it. We'll see.
Speaking of microtransactions,
I think this leads us into another news topic, eh, Matt?
Yes, let's have a little chat about Activision Blizzard. Now, we spoke last month about Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which is a remake of Crash Team Racing and Crash Nitro Kart. And in that game, you play racers, and by competing in races, you get this currency, which you can then spend in the in-game store, which has all these different kind of unlockables. You've got characters, skins, cards, sticker packs, all the usual kind of stuff that you'd expect. And then 1 month after release, Activision decides we're going to give people the choice,
The option
to pay real money for this currency. So rather than competing in races now, you can now buy this currency for real money and skip all of it. They had this GP mode where if you progress through the GP mode, you could either get like bronze, silver, or gold as rewards. The more you play, the more chance you're going to get to the gold. And it was like this really competitive thing. People playing it online. It was this real like community GP kind of thing. And now you can just skip straight to the gold rewards with real money, which sucks. It really sucks. But the insidious part of this is the fact that it went in a month after launch. Now, if you know about the ESRB, the ratings board, they put notices on the back of cases of games that have microtransactions in them that says this game contains in-game purchases. Now, with these in-game purchases coming in a month after release, none of the boxes have this sticker on. And they're there to kind of like help people make an informed choice, help parents when they're buying the games for the kids, they can decide whether or not they want to buy a game which has in-game transactions. No copies of Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled on the store shelves at the minute has this rating, has this little sticker on it. It also quite conveniently bypassed all the early reviews because obviously none of the early reviews mentioned microtransactions because they weren't in it. So it got all these positive reviews, and all of a sudden those reviews are kind of invalid, but it doesn't negate the good press that it's already got. People are going to look for reviews, they're going to see these initial reviews and think, yeah, great, it looks great. And essentially they've skirted government regulations, they've skirted the whole review thing, because people do review things less if it has microtransactions in it.
Right.
And the worst part about all of this is that is exactly how they planned it. That is what they intended to do from the very start. And they've already started increasing the price, the coin value of most of the items in the shop. So now it takes so much longer in game to earn enough coins to buy the stuff that you want, obviously to encourage you to just pay real money and just skip the grind. It's something that Activision have done before, and they keep getting away with it, and I don't know how. But I sold my copy of it. I mean, I was enjoying it, apart from a little problem that I was having with the difficulty. I was kind of like pushing through it and enjoying the game. But when this all came out, I was just like, no, it went straight on eBay.
That's real shitty.
Yeah.
So boo on you, Activision.
So frustrating.
But they got what they wanted. They had the desired result.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. And the worst part is, the ESRB was set up by the game industry to protect them from the government. And they're undermining the organization that is supposed to be helping them stay out of bad press.
Yeah. It is literally a private organization to avoid government regulation, and now they're undermining themselves. Literally, they're shooting themselves in the foot, and they're freaking out that various governments around the world are now going, we need to step in and do something here.
Like,
yeah,
this
I mean,
is the worst possible time to start pulling this shit.
Yeah.
The ESRB aren't exactly smelling of roses anyway. They have supported microtransactions in the past, but it is still shady to kind of like circumvent the like some of the protections that they've put in place.
Yeah.
But I think, the trailer for Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled should have just been Bobby Kotick staring directly into the camera while someone dresses him in a clown suit. That should have been the trailer for Crash Team Racing, because that's exactly what we got.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Yeah. And now I'm sad.
Yeah, it really sucks. Do we have any other news before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I can't think of anything.
Okay, then. So it's probably time to move into the main topic of this episode. So we will see you after the break.
Stranger! What you need that for? Going hunting an elephant?
Okay, so with the news segment out of the way, it's time to move on to our main topic. Now, this topic may be slightly controversial, I suppose. Overrated games. Now, I think the main problem with this is that the term overrated is a little bit loaded. It seems to indicate that you hate a game that other people like, and it's going to be controversial. However, the way that I perceive overrated is something that receives a certain amount of praise that the game doesn't necessarily deserve. It might still be a good game. It might be a shit game. But either way, it's not like fantastic best game of all time type thing. If you get what I mean? I mean, there's some games as well that... I mean, for example, GoldenEye is a game that I love. Don't get me wrong. However, people say it's the best game on the N64, or it's, the best. I mean, it's not even the best shooting game on the N64.
Yeah, but people
it's not
will
even the
hold
best
it to
shooting game by Rare.
People hold it to this standard of like the gold standard of N64 era shooters, and
But
really Perfect Dark was
then,
better.
Exactly.
Right,
I mean,
was
that's
just
people always
better.
say GoldenEye is like the best shooting game, but really, Perfect Dark does the exact same things, but better. It's just that people had more nostalgia for GoldenEye.
I'll put it this way: GoldenEye has the exact same Metacritic score as the original BioShock Mass Effect 2, and Zelda Twilight Princess. And I can tell you, all of those are far better than GoldenEye.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think I prefer GoldenEye to Bioshock. With regards to Twilight Princess, I'm not sure. I would probably prefer to play GoldenEye just because I have more of a fun time with it. But I think that's more to do with the fact that you can jump into GoldenEye in short bursts, whereas Twilight Princess is more of a game that you go into to complete it.
It is more of a long haul.
So I think it would be more difficult to compare those two.
Putting it up against Bioshock, I think, I would far and away prefer Bioshock.
Yeah, me too.
I wouldn't, but I mean, that's just me personally because
and at that point we come down to personal preference.
Yeah, that's where subjective meets objective.
But I mean, with GoldenEye, the single player I think holds up better than the multiplayer, because the multiplayer, I mean, even if you do manage to get 4 players around a single screen, it's still kind of limited because you've got for example, one of the better maps, Temple, is a very, very large map, and with 4 players, it is quite difficult to find people. I mean, unless you're playing on a smaller map, which there weren't actually that many smaller maps, there's probably going to be a lot of time when you're not actually seeing much action. Right. That's what I think, in terms of multiplayer, Perfect Dark succeeds because it's okay, you've got 4 players, but then there are bots as well, just so you've got other things to do and you're not going this lengthy period of time without seeing anyone. And you don't necessarily need to have 4 players. You can play the multiplayer solo. You can play it with just one friend. It's less limiting.
Right.
And I think that with GoldenEye, even with 4 players, it still feels empty at times.
That's why mine battles were the best, because you could just litter a room with mines and run across the map, and then screen peek when someone was in that room and set them off.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it can be fun. I'm sure a lot of people did have fun with the game back then, but really, in terms of multiplayer experiences, I mean, Turok Rage Wars was better. Perfect Dark was better. There were better multiplayer games which had more compact maps or had bots to them that kind of made a more enjoyable experience.
And that's the important thing. That's where the Overrated comes in as far as what is important. It's not that the game was bad, because GoldenEye is not a bad game by any means.
No, I mean, even the single player, it does have its flaws, a lot of the maps do feel quite empty, and there's not really that much going on in them, but they're still fun to play. It's still a really good game, and I'd still say it's one of the best games on the system. But is it the best game on the system? No.
Well, no, because Perfect Dark exists.
Yeah, because but it's put on a pedestal it does not deserve. Another game, Final Fantasy VII. It's held as a beacon, and I think the reason it's held at this, it's given 11s when it deserves 8s, is because it was the first one that a lot of people played.
Yeah.
And it was the first 3D experience. So
is that
all
the first
these
3D
marks.
Final Fantasy then?
It is. And honestly, 8 did a lot of stuff better.
I think that's probably going to be one of the main things, is now we're in the 3D era of gaming, the first 3D entry of a series is probably going to be the first 3D one that people have played, or maybe even the first game people have played.
It was exclusive to the PlayStation, and the PlayStation was absolutely blowing up. And Sony put a lot of money behind marketing the PlayStation. Square put a lot of money behind marketing Final Fantasy VII. So it just, as far as I'm aware, it is still the biggest selling Final Fantasy game.
Is that the first PlayStation one? Because it was Nintendo before, wasn't it?
Final Fantasy VII was originally planned for the N64 disc drive. Well, actually, it might have been planned for the Nintendo PlayStation. Eventually, they realized that Final Fantasy VII wasn't going to work with the cartridge system, so they went to PlayStation, where they still had 3 different discs.
But it was more manageable than 20 carts.
Yeah, it would have been so much harder to do it on cartridges. But we're talking about it being overrated. Yeah, I'm sitting on the homepage of Metacritic, which, by the way, Perfect Dark is a point above GoldenEye, so I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that. But Final Fantasy IX is the only one I see that has cracked it out of the Final Fantasy series.
But I think in terms of like game facts, that's another thing. But I think in terms of the general consensus, I definitely hear a lot more about Final Fantasy VII than I do any other Final Fantasy game.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And here's the
92,
thing.
92 on Metacritic. That's ridiculous.
Like even when new Final Fantasy games come out, there seems to be more talk of Final Fantasy VII than the latest Final Fantasy game.
Right. Because, I mean, like, 10, in my opinion, was a better Final Fantasy game. It's kind of hard to count the MMOs because they're so different. But, I mean, I, really enjoy 14. And
Yeah, me too.
There's a bunch of Final Fantasy games that are as good or better than 7, but 7 is the one everyone goes to.
I think probably the biggest kicker for any of these, to be honest, is probably nostalgia.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of have to be able to go beyond nostalgia into seeing just how a game is. I mean, like, I know that GoldenEye I probably enjoy more because of nostalgia. But then there are games, like, for example, in my opinion, Super Mario 64, I think that still holds up quite a lot. I do have nostalgia for it. And despite the occasionally wonky camera, which, given this was like one of the first proper 3D games, I think it's probably a bit more, understandable and something you can forgive a bit more. I still don't think the camera is that bad compared to other 3D games.
Honestly,
I
it's
think as a
better
gamer-
than Ukulele's camera.
Exactly. Like, Ukulele is a modern game, and yet the camera to Super Mario 64 is better. But I think as a game, like Mario 64 still kind of holds up. I mean, now I think Odyssey is better from an objective standpoint, but, judging by the other 3D Marios, like 64 is definitely better than Sunshine, for example.
Oh, I don't know
Galaxy
about that.
game. Well, I have issues with Sunshine. I think it's a good game, but it does have a lot of issues that I think have, kind of hold it back. I think the linearity of it is definitely a sticking point for me, as is the fact that almost every level's a beach, or has a beach of some sort, so it does start to feel like, oh, it's another beach level. I mean, it does have variations, but it doesn't feel like there's as much variety.
It's not like Galaxy where you do have kind of like so much different variety too, because you're like literally going to different planets.
Yeah.
I mean, like Galaxy, I only played a bit of Galaxy 1, which I thought was decent, but I had major issues with the controls. I just couldn't get to grips with it. I mean, hopefully they end up doing like a Switch port of it eventually, or some kind of modern remake of it, so I can experience it without the infuriating fucking waggle and bullshit Wii remote. But certainly in terms of the 3D games I've played, I think Mario 64 is still a really good game.
It is.
Oh, absolutely.
But then there are other first 3D games which don't hold up necessarily as well. Well, I think it's time to bring up.
Are we going to make people
I think.
mad? Let's make people mad.
Yeah, so Ocarina of Time. That is generally regarded as the best game of all time.
Yeah, it is the only game with a 99 on Metacritic.
Yeah,
There's
and I
nothing
think
above it.
Was it last year or the year before, which was like the only year it didn't get best game of all time because it got second to Undertale or something?
Something like that.
And like people were really, really angry because Undertale was, number one and not Ocarina. Them damn SJWs.
I've played Undertale, and Ocarina is better than Undertale.
I've not played it yet, so I have no idea.
I have no opinion there.
Honestly, I mean, in terms of Undertale, I think it's charming. I like the art style, and I get that the general feel of the game is quite cutesy and quite endearing, but the game itself is just everything I hate. It's a JRPG, but then like the actual combat is based on bullet hell.
Right.
So that's two genres I despise in one. So even though I despise playing Undertale based on like what I played of it, I don't think it's a bad game at all. And
So it's a really good game.
yeah, I can see that. I can see why a lot of people would like it, but I know that just because it's got two genres I despise fused together, I know that this game is definitely not for me. So it's one that I think, okay, you can enjoy that, and I'll just stay over here. Thank you very much. So I don't give Undertale any bad will, and I also can't comment on whether it's good or not because It's not for me.
What makes Ocarina of Time so horribly overrated? Why do people hold it up so high? Because I've beaten it a few times, and I'm not going to say it's a bad game. But almost every single 3D Zelda game since has done it better.
Well, and you've already touched on why, because it was a lot of people's first Zelda game.
Yeah.
Even now, they're like, you can read things, they're like, oh my god, the story is so amazing. The story is pretty fucking bland.
The story is basically like a retelling of A Link to the Past.
It's Zelda Light. It's, oh no, Ganondorf. I mean, they had the time travel component there that was, has been used again and again in some form or another. But it's like, oh yeah, it's...
But I mean, like, the time travel thing
King
was
of Evil.
But it is like this other world kind of thing, which is basically like the A Link to the Past Dark World.
Exactly.
Well, and here's the thing,
same idea, just it's the future rather than an evil version.
Yeah,
But
and that's basically, that was what they wanted to do with the first game, is they wanted to have the present and the future, and like, the Triforce was going to be microchips and everything, but they didn't have the hardware capacity to implement it.
Yeah. I mean, before we start making any criticisms of Ocarina, I think it's important to, look at what it did right, and that might give us an indication about why it's held in such high regard. I mean, personally, I think in terms of setting the formula for a 3D Zelda, it got it right out of the bat. It knocked it out of the park.
It did. It has smooth combat because of the lock-on system.
Yeah. So it got the whole camera thing because
they didn't have to worry about that shit. It had an interesting overworld, given the hardware limitations. The N64 was good. It wasn't, infinite, obviously.
Right.
The music, I will admit, is excellent.
Yeah.
It has excellent music. I can't downplay that in any way. I can't say, oh, it wasn't good. No, the score is great.
And it translated the dungeons really well, because I mean, like, the dungeons, you've got these puzzle solvings with items and then a boss based on the item, and that's what 2D Zelda was. And this was basically the same. It felt like Zelda.
Okay, so here's one of my points of contention, and
I mean the general idea of it. I don't mean necessarily its implementation. I mean that in terms of the format, the general formula for a Zelda as a template.
Well, but okay, so my issue is that it took the idea of use the dungeon item against the boss and made it weaker as a concept. And I'm gonna apologize to listeners and Ego Raptor because once again I'm stealing talking points from Sequelitis. But it became use the item to stun the boss and then hit it with your sword.
It is true.
Whereas there were bosses in Link to the Past where your sword did nothing, and you had to use your items to even deal damage to it. So I feel like establishing that particular pattern for bosses weakened some of the encounters. Because it's like, oh, this big thing is too far away, I'm going to shoot it with my bow, and then it leans forward so I can hit it with my sword.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, as an idea, it still kind of took the general concept of it, right, as in using the item against the boss. Right. I do agree that it kind of then undermined that with the whole using the sword issue. I think that's a fair comment to make. But, I mean, you still had the using the item against the boss thing, which, it still kind of sort of did that right in a way, even if it didn't do it perfectly.
The biggest problem that I had, going into Ocarina of Time, and of course I didn't play it when it first came out, I played it years later, but knowing that it's the game right after Link to the Past and seeing it go backwards on some things that Link to the Past did so well, and I mean, like, that was inevitable because you're going from 2D to 3D,
yeah,
and the change from 2D to 3D is, it's so odd, it's, not even really quantifiable why it's so difficult, but at the same time, like, there were things that they did so well in Link to the Past that they just dropped in Ocarina.
For me, I think the biggest problem is that most of the dungeons just aren't fun.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I like 3 of the dungeons, and the rest of them range from being okay to being, oh my god, when will this fucking dungeon end?
You mean the water temple, right?
The water temple is one I like. I like
No.
the water temple, the shadow temple, and the spirit temple. I love. The rest of them
Shit,
can
this
go
is
to
going to be a controversial episode. Holy
Yeah,
shit.
yeah. So here's my thing about the water temple.
I like the water temple. It's just that it has problems. The 3DS version fixed the water temple,
Like the water temple is supposed to be this legendarily difficult. Oh my god, it's so hard.
but it's not.
If you look at your map, it tells you what rooms you've been in and where you need to go. So and this is another issue with the game is most people played this when they were 8, 9, 10 and didn't have all this previous experience with Zelda. They thought, "Oh, this is so difficult," and they don't think to
They look at the map.
right because they don't have the experience with these games to know to do that.
But
Well,
I didn't have difficulty with it when I was a child.
Frustrating bit that I always had with the water temple was that I'd inevitably miss a room and I'd get ahead of myself and raise the water level, and then I'd have to run through and cycle the water all the way through again.
Yeah.
And then so I can go to the room and be like, oh yeah, now I gotta do this. Like, oh no, I forgot one more thing. I have to cycle the water again. And it's just time consuming and frustrating.
Yeah.
It is if you miss a room, but as Steven says, if you check the map to make sure that
Yeah, if
you've
you're-
done all the rooms, you don't necessarily have to do it like more than once.
Yeah.
I mean-
The only thing in the water temple that frustrated me, and
Iron boots.
no, not even. It was
Things like iron boots, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, it's like 3 button presses, which
Yeah.
you can do relatively quickly.
Yeah,
It's
no.
still stupid that you can't equip the iron boots as like on the C buttons. That was stupid because
Right.
you have to be switching backwards and forwards between it so often. It's still not that bad to just flick a couple of buttons.
Right.
And that's one of those things that they fixed in Twilight Princess was
Yes.
you can just equip them and pop in and out.
Right.
Yeah.
No, the only thing that frustrated me about the water temple was the first time you need to change the water level, I didn't stand in the right place to play
So
the
you could-
song.
So you didn't realize you had to do that.
Well, so like I would go stand in front of it and play the song and nothing would happen. And then, I'd go run around, see what else I could do, and then try it again. And like eventually I would stand in the exact right spot. And I'm like, okay, so I knew what to do. I just wasn't standing where it wanted me to.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was the only part that frustrated me. And that was just, user error.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, the water temple, I think is actually one of the better dungeons. It's not the best. I definitely prefer the shadow and spirit temples. Like the shadow one for the general design and the spirit temple because, it's genuinely quite clever.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, the other temples, I mean, like, people always say the forest temple is so good. But that is probably my least favourite. Maybe I
it's-
dislike the fire temple more, but like the forest temple I just find so dull and so irritating, and the music just gets on my fucking tits.
I always get lost in the forest temple too, and every time I
too.
don't know
And
how.
also, yeah, that I'm the same. I get lost in it, and I don't know how because it's not like it's particularly difficult or anything.
It's baby's
I
first
just-
dungeon.
I think I just get frustrated with it and then end up going the wrong direction, end up like, oh, I've got to do this again. And then the puzzles aren't very fun. Like, you've got to attack the ghost things and do that like 4 times and
Yeah.
go in that boring fight with them. And then the boss is just kind of shit. Like, the boss is basically the same as the penultimate boss. Just that tennis match, which is kind of okay, but in the forest temple, it's more frustrating because he goes around you. So
Oh,
rather
wait, I was
than
thinking
in the
of the
center
wrong
of the room, you have to be facing the right direction. Otherwise, it's a bit awkward to hit it back. And yeah, I just don't find that temple rather fun. And the fire temple can go to hell. Like, I just find that infuriating with like all those firewalls and everything, and the boulders.
Yeah, no, it's not great.
And then the rest I just find rather dull. I mean, like the Deku Tree, for example, just feels like an extended tutorial, which in addition to the tutorial bit, it just feels like the introduction to the game goes on forever. Like, it feels like it's forever until like anything happens.
Well, it has
Yeah.
to be kind of like a somewhat simpler dungeon because it is essentially, like you said, a tutorial dungeon. It's just is small. It's not particularly difficult. It's just kind of like slowly easing you into that mechanic, because this would have been most people's, well, a
First
lot
one.
of people's first one.
And
You know,
I get
so
that,
you,
but it also
you do
means
have
that-
to have that there.
I get that, and I do agree, especially because this is one of the earliest 3D games too, so this will introduce a lot of new concepts. But at the same time, it does feel infuriating on playthroughs again. So whilst it probably would have been okay for your first time playing, when you're replaying again and getting constant help from Navi and you've got all this kind of slow bullshit, I think maybe having a more efficient tutorial but still going through the same things might have been a little bit better. But it's still one of those things where I dread replaying the tutorial of Ocarina because it feels like it drags so much. I mean, I get its existence, but it also means that it doesn't hold up as well.
Well, and there's so much climbing in that Deku Tree as well, and the climbing is so slow.
Yeah.
It's painfully slow.
And the cutscenes are going forever.
They do.
It's like, please, skippable cutscenes when?
And that's the thing. It's like there are so many little things that they could have done, and instead all they did was just, as well as they did, they just translated Zelda, and it's apparent that's all they did, because then you get into shit like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, and I know you hate Breath of the Wild, but even Breath of the Wild did a lot of good stuff like fast climbing.
When you could climb.
Yeah, when you could climb, you can climb pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's just like that's why was climbing so painfully slow? It's like an artificial way of extending thing. And even if you don't want to go that far, you know, it's like, oh yeah, well, it's 20 years later.
Yeah, I mean, like, in fairness, I say I can appreciate some of these things being done because it's the first Zelda game. And it's a lot of people's first 3D Zelda game. So I can appreciate why they did certain things. And I can appreciate why, you know, people would have loved it at the time. But like with me, replaying it and going back to it, it's much harder time, so I don't really have much nostalgia for it. Even though I played it and loved it as a child, I don't have the nostalgia for it now because I don't think it holds up. So I think that it's overrated in the sense of it's been regarded as best game of all time and people just adore it, rather than saying, okay, it was a good game at its time, now it's not as good and other Zelda games are better. But you know,
whereas
it's a
someone
product
like
of its time.
someone like me, I didn't play this game until 2014. So I came in having already played Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess and Majora's Mask, and I had already played all these other games, and you know, but
That
basically
did it better.
yeah, well, Twilight Princess is basically Ocarina of Time but bigger and better.
Yes.
Yeah, sort
Like-
of. I mean,
like,
Twilight
well-
Princess, I hate the wolf bits and the overworld, but the dungeons are top notch.
Well, and that's the thing. Once you take the wolf bits out of the equation, it like the story beats are there from Ocarina of Time.
Oh yeah,
And
hands down.
You know, the dungeons are designed in the same way. Like, it's basically just Ocarina of Time but bigger, and it just doesn't bode well for someone who plays that and then plays Ocarina of Time. It's like, well, I've already played the better version. You know, Majora's Mask was.
I mean, you've played the better version if you played A Link to the Past, to be honest.
Yeah, you know, Majora's Mask was made using Ocarina of Time assets in, you know, a year, and is a much better game.
It's a much better game. Ocarina of Time is a copy-paste, pretty bland Legend of Zelda story. Ganon's the big bad. He's going to get the Triforce. Uh-oh, beat him up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the problems as well
Most
is
of them have done that.
Yeah, I think that the main problem is that they just went the generic route. They just went, okay, generic story, generic dungeons. Let's just make everything as safe as possible for this first one.
Yeah.
I mean, really, Metroid Prime did the same thing. It's like, here's an ice world, here's a fire world, here's a jungle world. And you kind of get these kind of very safe environments. And I kind of appreciate why they did it. But again, going back to it, it just feels like almost every other Zelda game is just better.
But that's like, but Majora's Mask did the same thing. Majora's Mask had your jungle board and your desert board and your ice board.
I mean, it used the same character models and
used the same character models and just renamed them into sort of this weird backwards world.
Yeah.
But the story was different, and it was darker, and it was more complex.
The story was more interesting.
Yeah.
And better.
The items were more interesting.
And the side quests.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the side quests in Majora's Mask are fantastic.
And the side quests in Ocarina of Time are just a drag. They're so boring to do.
The mass trading quest goes on forever.
Yeah, especially when the postman doesn't show up.
Yeah. And then the fucking Skulltulas. Oh my god, they're the most infuriating things in the world.
Yeah.
Getting all of those bloody things.
And that's the thing, is
that's basically the side quests.
We had Majora's Mask come out on the heels of Ocarina of Time. A year of development time using the same assets, and it was so much better.
So much better.
And yet, Ocarina of Time is the one everyone fawns over. Majora's Mask sits at a 95 on Metacritic.
Which is still really good.
Which is still good.
And maybe even a little overrated?
Maybe?
But a 99 for Ocarina of Time, and most people give it hundreds and tens.
And being the only 99 on the site.
I still think it's okay. I mean, I have played Ocarina of Time, countless times, so it can't be that bad. But, every time I play it, I seem to enjoy it less. And I think that it's very much a product for its time. I think it was the right Zelda for the first 3D Zelda.
Right.
There are some things that probably could have been tweaked and could have been better. I think in terms of a first 3D Zelda, they gave it a good crack.
And I
think it's overrated in the sense of, the other Zeldas are just better.
Well, and this is where the comparisons to Breath of the Wild are actually justified. It was the right Zelda at the right time, and people loved it because of that.
Hate Breath of the Wild years down the line. I'm sure of it.
But it's, at the time, it was, wildly popular. It was very well received. It's the right Zelda at the right time, because the Zelda formula was starting to get stale. Skyward Sword proved that doing the same thing over and over again wasn't working anymore.
Yeah.
So they changed the formula of Breath of the Wild, and it was the right thing at the right time. The same as moving to 3D, it just happened to be the right thing at the right time. The series was riding high after Link to the Past, and I think the only way to improve on that was 3D. Now, they didn't succeed in making a better game, but
they succeeded in translating to 3D and doing what people were sort of after.
Right. They made the transition much better than Sonic, and were able to then they were able to then work that into the future Zeldas that were so much better, like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree with that.
For me, Ocarina of Time was my first Zelda game, so that probably does colour my opinions quite a bit. I've not really played too many other Zelda games. I've put a few hours into Link to the Past. I've completed Breath of the Wild, but I really, really like Ocarina of Time.
Play Majora, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess.
There are still other games that, if I play those, maybe my opinion of Ocarina will go down. But as it stands at the minute, I mean, I replayed a few hours in the past couple of weeks, and I'm still absolutely loving it. I've never managed to finish it because I always get distracted kind of a few hours in and just forget to go back to it. But
is that an indicator, though, if you get distracted, where you kind of think, okay, this other thing is getting my attention more than Ocarina?
I wouldn't necessarily say so. I mean, because I do kind of play an MMO on a daily basis, that is always kind of going to be my main thing.
Right.
So it just depends on, right at this point, do I want to play Ocarina of Time, or do I want to go on to Final Fantasy 14? And I would prefer to play Final Fantasy 14 because I think it's a better game. But I do still really like Ocarina. And I mean, my N64 is still hooked up with the game in it downstairs, and I am still putting a bit in like every couple of days or so. So hopefully I will finish it, but I am still really enjoying it on this playthrough.
Well, and this is, I think, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I first played Link to the Past. That was my first Zelda game, and it was one I have very good memories with for all the reasons we talked about in the first episode. But when I see the next game be so beloved and so wildly popular, and people are saying, "Oh, it's so much better than this other one," and I'm like, "But this is the one I like so much." I was kicking hard against that at the time, even though I hadn't played it. But it's one of those things where the first one does have an impact. Like, it really does.
Well, I don't know. Ocarina was my first Zelda game, and I enjoyed it as a child. And then it's going back to it like years later. I was like, I'm not as fond of it. Like, as I say, the more I play, the more I start to be less tolerant of it.
Well, the other thing to consider for you is that you're also used to looking at games in this critical light. Like, we do this on a monthly basis. You've gotten to the point where you start looking at games with your critic brain instead of just your game player brain.
Oh no, I've been like this for ages with Ocarina. I've always been a bit kind of indifferent about it.
Oh, well.
I think probably the issue is that I enjoyed Ocarina, and then Majora came out, and I was like, oh, Majora's really good.
It's so much better.
And then I played Wind Waker, and I was like, oh, Wind Waker's great. And then I go back to Ocarina, and it's like, it's okay.
Where's my boat?
Because, I think when I replayed Ocarina, it was with Wind Waker. Because I will have played Wind Waker first, because, it was a new Zelda at the time. But then it came with a bonus disc that had Ocarina on it.
Right.
So I imagine my first replay since the N64 days will have been on the GameCube bonus disc. And then since then, I've replayed it quite a few times, and I think I just like Majora and Wind Waker better.
Which, by the way, consider yourself lucky. We had to pay for the extra disc that had Ocarina of Time on it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because they did didn't they do the collection or something?
Yeah, they did the collection with Ocarina of Time, Master Quest, and Majora's Mask. And we had to pay for that.
Zelda 1 and 2 as well.
Yes.
Were on there. Yeah.
Yeah, they released that over in Europe, but we also got the GameCube disc with Ocarina on it.
At the end of the day, I'm not going to just shit all over Ocarina of Time because it deserves... Yeah, it deserves respect for being what it is.
Yeah.
But it is not the greatest game of all time.
And it is even fair to say that, at least at that time, it was sort of a benchmark for 3D adventure games for a cool minute.
Yeah. I think looking at it as its place in history and looking at it isolated for that time, it was a really good game.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is if you go back to 1997? If you go back to because Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask released in 2000, didn't it? Beginning of 2000. Anyway, if you teleport back to 1998 and you say, what is the best 3D title? The best 3D adventure game? It deserves that 99 rating.
I don't think it deserves 99, but it's still a great game for its time. It would have been above 90 for its time. But then going back to it, it's like, okay, doesn't quite hold up as well.
Yeah, but when you have more of the same franchise, it doesn't stack up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, my granddad, let's just say, was an Olympic athlete, and the entire family is Olympic athletes. They're all runners. Granddad set records back in the day. You can't go back and say Granddad, who is 90 years old, is going to outrun the family. It's not going to happen. That's not how it works.
That's a really weird analogy.
It is, but it's as weird as it is accurate, because once upon a time, not that fast anymore.
I mean, it doesn't really kind of work well with video games because, I say like Mario 64 is better than Sunshine, so it's not necessarily the subsequent game is always going to be better.
No, it's not always. Well, I mean, I think Sunshine's better, but we can fight about that at a different time.
But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily like it's going to be better. But either way, I mean, I don't think Ocarina is necessarily a bad game. I think it's definitely a solid Zelda game, and I think it's decent enough, and it was certainly excellent for its time. But best game of all time?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I mean,
Best Zelda of all
don't,
time?
No, not even close. I don't think, like you said, Super Mario 64 still really holds up very well. I just played that. I mean, we played it for this last year, and it still holds up really well. Ocarina of Time does not hold up that well, especially because the others have surpassed it so much. And like Mario has been surpassed by its other games, but 64 is still fun to go back and play.
Well,
Ocarina of Time isn't as fun to go back to.
I think that's an interesting thing as well, is we talked about the tutorial of Zelda, and it was the first Zelda experience for a lot of people, so that's why it had all that tutorial.
Right.
But then you had the same with Mario 64. Now, Mario 64 was the first 3D Mario game, but then the tutorial for that wasn't so much in your face and wasn't as kind of dragging you down as much.
You learned as you went.
You learned as you went, and it
Well, yeah,
kind of introduced through doing.
They
mainly.
very strategically place signs where you're like, I don't know where to go, but there's a sign here. Click, do this to wall jump. When
Yeah.
you're running around the courtyard, when it drops you in, there's a sign right there that's just like, this is jump, this is kick. You can hit if you do your timing right. You can get big jumps, and then I think it literally says, try stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you think about other games that were the first of their type, and, you know, the tutorial for that wasn't as bad. And yet Zelda, it's got this really kind of full-on tutorial that just kind of drags the game down when you
Yep.
read it. It's
And
like,
what's funny is
I mean, Pokemon does the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like Pokemon, I don't want to go through this fucking hour-long tutorial every single fucking time.
Yes.
But the games do it, and that is a flaw.
The thing with Pokemon is any game could be somebody's first.
But
So they
even
have.
then, it still goes on.
Oh yeah, it goes on way too long.
They still drag it out.
But the crazy thing with Ocarina of Time is that it's basically the exact opposite of the original Legend of Zelda. Whereas the original Legend of Zelda, you're dropped in a map and given no instructions, and you have to just find everything.
Yeah, shit,
Yeah.
You're not even given a sword.
Yeah.
You can wander off into the death zone without a weapon.
Yeah.
And then, like Ocarina of Time, it's like, we're going to hold your hand, even way past the point of actually needing it. One more thing about Ocarina as well, and I have to get this off my chest. One thing that really, really, really annoys me when I play it, that fucking owl. That goddamn fucking owl.
Well, and that one in particular is frustrating because they trick you, because most dialogue boxes, just clicking through will get you to the,
Yeah.
the end of it.
It's like,
That-
do you want me to, do you want to hear this again?
Yeah.
And then it defaults to yes. So you can't just click through them. If you click through them, you go through the story. Like, there's been so many times I've had him repeat the same thing like 3 fucking times.
It's really annoying.
And it's not even short, it's like 10 text boxes or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness.
I mean, I noticed something else as well in this particular playthrough. Zelda's a bit of a bigoted asshole. Because
Yeah, a
you know
little
when
bit.
you know
That
when you
dark
first
man
meet
over
her in the
there, he
castle.
feels awful.
Yeah, she talks about this dream she had, this dark cloud kind of thing. That guy looks a bit shifty. I bet he's evil.
I mean, he
You know,
is
it,
evil,
just
so
she
he's
just
not
looks at a
wrong.
window, sees this random guy that that's part of her father's army, and is like, he's got
He's a
shifty
fucking
eyes. He must be the bad guy. It's like that's a bit just. I mean, you're right, but you know, it
I mean,
is
you can't
it is
fault
a
her
bit
for
cheeky.
accuracy. She's spot on with him, but
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, she is the holder of the Triforce of Wisdom, so you'd think she'd have a lockdown on that. But yeah, it's just kind of like, well, and then because it's like, it's even better because, like, oh, he's of the Gerudo tribe, and it's like, the Gerudos, they're thieves and bandits. It's like, Turns out, once, you get down there, it's like, oh, yeah, they're kind of assholes, but then also, maybe they're not that bad. They're just kind of like, they don't like outsiders to come in and steal their shit and cause trouble.
But then when you've got a princess saying, look at that funny coloured man with the shifty eyes, then maybe they've got a right to be suspicious of outsiders.
Yeah.
Right.
Now trending on Twitter, Princess Zelda is racist.
In terms of overrated games, I think Ocarina is certainly up there as one of the most overrated.
Oh, absolutely.
Although not necessarily bad.
Not bad, just overrated as hell.
It's not a bad game. It is not the greatest game of all time, and that's what I can't get people to understand.
But I mean, in terms of like other games, can you think of any other games that you think are kind of quite overrated? Not necessarily as much as say Ocarina, but something that's certainly up there.
I mean,
I
I
mean-
got something, but I'm saving it for the end.
Oh, fair. I mean, like
I mean-
I know that in terms of Pokemon, the first generation seems to be hailed as this fantastic game, but
And
Yeah,
it's,
I mean, here's
it's
the thing.
actually really rough.
Yeah, like I mean, the code is held together with twigs and glue. Like the second generation, if you want that original experience, the second generation was so much better.
It was. But people are like rabid over red and blue and yellow.
Yeah, which you know what? I played through Yellow a few years ago when Sun and Moon were coming out, and it doesn't hold up all that well. Like it gets to the point where it's not as fun anymore because you know all the secrets, you know all the ways to take advantage of it, and you can just steamroll everything.
in fairness, you can kind of appreciate because it's the first game, so there are going to be like faults with the mechanics, especially for something as complex as Pokemon. But
The problem they have is they just didn't have the hardware to support what they were trying to do.
Well, I don't know about that because second gen was still Game Boy.
Right, but it did not run as well on the Game Boy as it did on the Game Boy Color, and they had more time to refine their process at that point.
Fair enough.
So they were able to compress it a little bit more, and were working predominantly with the Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Color, which were stronger systems.
yeah, definitely. I mean, like I think in terms of the first game, I think the story is really good. Like I think the Kanto story and the whole layout is fine, and like mechanically it's a bit wonky. It's fine. I think it's a good game, and I still can play like Red, Blue, or Yellow now and think it's good.
Well,
I
and
mean,
here's
my main problem is like the movement speed seems like quite slow, in a post-running shoes era.
my primary issue is it's not even the best version of Kanto. We have
Oh,
Fire
yeah.
Red and Leaf Green, we have
Eh.
Let's Go, and we have the abbreviated version of Kanto in the Gen 2 games, which admittedly isn't as in-depth, but it's still, I still prefer that Kanto experience to the first game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Gen 2 Kanto is definitely better than Gen 1 Kanto as a whole. But yeah, I mean, with regards to the original story, I think Let's Go is the better game. I'm not particularly fond of Fire Red and Leaf Green for various reasons, which I won't go into now, but I think that in terms of experiencing that story, I think you'd have a better time playing Let's Go than,
Yeah.
playing the original game. Not that it's bad, I can still play it and enjoy it, but I think that there are much better Pokemon games. In terms of like my favorite Pokemon games list, it's sort of low down. Yeah, I would say maybe my third least favorite. I would say 3 is the bottom, and then 6 with Kalos, and then I like Kanto a bit more than that, the original Kanto, and then the rest of them I just think are better games, to be honest.
Yeah.
And like people always really say that the original Pokemon designs are the best.
Eh,
They're all right for the most part, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily the best. I mean, like you even had some stinkers back then, which
Yeah.
weren't necessarily fantastic. I mean, like people complain about Garbodor being like a bag of trash, but then Muck and Grimer are basically toxic waste. It's essentially
Yeah.
the same thing, but relevant to that region.
I mean, people complain about the keys and the ice cream cone, and it's like, okay, sure, but I mean, is it really that bad?
I mean, this is a Voltorb. It's a Pokeball with eyes.
Yeah.
And the evolution is just the same thing, but upside down. And it's like, I mean, it's fine. I mean, like Voltorb and Electrode, I don't have any issues with. But if you're saying that, they lack inspiration now and they've run out of ideas, I mean, they had some pretty basic ideas back then.
Yeah,
This is
I mean,
basically a rat. This is basically a pigeon.
it's a bigger
I mean,
rat.
Had some, exactly. I mean, they were quite simple back then still. In terms of games that are overrated, it still probably should be included.
Yeah, definitely.
So Resident Evil 4 then.
Let's piss off the rest of the internet.
Let's move on to our second game, which is another game that's very, very highly regarded, especially by some people that are co-hosts in this podcast. Matt.
Yeah.
Like, I think Resident Evil 4 is an overrated game. I don't think it's anywhere near as overrated as Ocarina, where there's a massive difference between how much it's praised and how good it actually is. I think that gap is definitely smaller, and I think it's still a good game, but not as good as the praise. So I still think it's overrated in that regard. Now, I've got a lot of experience with Resident Evil 4, but I know that for you, Stephen, it was your first time.
Yeah, this is my first time playing
And-
Resident Evil 4.
Ryan, is it your first time as well? It's not, is it?
It's not my first time, but it's been a minute since I've touched Resident Evil 4, so it might as well have been.
All right, so I think a good idea, because with this one, I know it's the first time for Stephen. Stephen, do you want to open up with, what do you think of Resident Evil 4 from your, hands-on experience?
So I didn't get very far
first of all,
in.
Have
but
you played like any of the subsequent Resident Evils? I know you've played like the old school
I have played.
tank ones, but have you played like 5 or 6?
No, I have not played 5, 6, or 7. I have played basically the first disc of the first one.
Okay, so this is essentially your first experience with this style of Resident Evil.
Yes.
Just want to get this out of the way. So this game would basically be the transition from the original fixed camera position style to this more of a typical behind-the-shoulder style.
Right.
Okay, so this for you would be just like a person experiencing it for the first time in 2001.
Right. I did not get very far. I think I did a little bit into chapter 3, but I can see why people like this game. It does feel better than the original Resident Evil did, even on GameCube. And, the combat is, more action-oriented. It's got some of that humor element once you get further in. I can see why people like this game. It did not click with me at first. When I played that first chapter and was going through, it was very frustrating. I was not having a good time, and I even said that I was enjoying Ocarina more than this, and I have been famous for criticizing Ocarina of Time. As I got further in, I was less frustrated and more just, okay, this is the flow of the game. This is, where it's going. And this is a good game. I'm not going to say this is a bad game at all. I will say, I don't know if it's necessarily the best. I did enjoy the first one more, but I was also playing the most recent release of the first one. But what I did notice...
the subsequent re-releases are just sharper visuals, to be honest, for Resident Evil 4. They don't really improve that much.
Right. But what I did notice when I was doing some research is that this was kind of a peak moment for the series, where they still had the horror elements from the first 3 games, and they still had that tone and atmosphere, but they had the more action style gameplay that the later ones would become known for, and they found a way to meld them together very well. That opening bit is frustrating, if you don't know what you're doing, but it's still effective in terms of tone and atmosphere. So I think that was actually very well done, and they did a good job of melding the two styles. Obviously I don't know how it is late in the game, but early on they do still have some of that Resident Evil feel from the first one.
Honestly, I would say as you get later into the game, it doesn't really retain much of the horror feel. It is generally more action. I mean, there are horror sections. There are 1-2 bits where it gets a little bit creepy, but generally speaking, it doesn't really focus on the horror too much at all.
I'm not sure. I mean, the castle does still seem to have that horror atmosphere. For the most part, there's some bits that don't. And the island, I think, is mainly action, but then there are some sequences that are horror-led. The regenerators, for example, those sections are definitely horror-based.
Oh yeah, the whole section in the lab.
Yeah. So, Stephen, how was your experience with the mechanics of the game? So the overall mechanics of how you moved, how everything worked.
So the camera was very frustrating for me for a while, because a lot of times I'd be trying to move forward, but because of the angle the camera is at, I'd be drifting to the right and not be able to see what's on my left side up ahead. So there were a couple of times where something snuck up on me because my camera was angled right and it came at me from the left. So I did find that frustrating. The shooting mechanics I actually didn't have that much of a problem with. I know, some people take issue with having a stand still while you shoot. as someone who, actually has significant experience with firearms, I do not like to move and shoot, so that actually kind of worked for me. The mechanics actually didn't really bother me that much. I mean, even I didn't get far enough for the inventory to be as much of an issue, but it didn't feel bad to play. Like, it definitely, I mean, it's the GameCube, so it's going to have, some quirks to it because they were, working with the inferior system of the time, but it plays pretty decently. Like, I didn't have too many complaints about the mechanics other than the camera, like I said.
Yeah, I think the camera is probably the worst thing. I think it's a little bit too fixed behind you, and it feels like it's a bit difficult to move around. I mean, like, the inventory, to be honest, I consider to be the best part of the game. Like, inventory Tetris is like one of the best mini games in Resident Evil. It's definitely a lot better than, hey, you've got 6 slots available.
And I did like that the typewriters were not limited to an item. That, I have a consumable item to save my game, so I better not save right now in case I need it later. I didn't really like that in the first one, so I was glad to see it gone in this one.
Yeah, definitely. I can appreciate that. I mean, you do get a fair amount of ink ribbons in your games, but it does have unnecessary stress.
Right.
But this was like the one of the first over-the-shoulder third-person games. So those movement issues, they are kind of like baby steps into that kind of like control mechanism. Subsequent games did get that a lot better.
Right.
But just that very first early step into the genre, it does feel a bit awkward going back to it. But it is something you get that you get used to. And in the HD remakes, like on the PS4 or the modern consoles, they do have an additional control scheme that does work a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the mechanics, I was playing it on the GameCube, the mechanics are solely the most frustrating thing that I've ever encountered in a third-person shooter. Like, I practically have a list here of what I hate, and it's primarily controls. A third-person shooter with tank controls is unnecessary when all the consoles at the time that were supporting this game were doing twin sticks. And they were so close to doing like a proper 2-stick setup, and they didn't. Because you can move your camera around.
Barely.
And there's no reason that they couldn't have done a look and strafe setup. There's no reason. I don't know why they opted for a aim function.
I'm guessing that they were trying to go for the horror kind of element.
Well,
and they were worried that going from fixed camera to full movement might kind of ruin that. So maybe they wanted to do this halfway house.
And that's bad, lazy design. Because it means that they weren't able to make a game that was stressful and was building tension, and they had to give you a frustrating control scheme to make movement clumsy in order to make it stressful.
Survival horror was all about back then.
But that's
the controls, and you're fighting that, which makes.
But when you bring it to a modern console in a modern era, it shines through as a flaw. And like, this game rocks a 96 on Metacritic. I don't see it because so they obviously knew that you'd have to turn around and run away to put space between you. So instead of being able to turn quickly because they knew you would have to, you can just hold back and press B and you do a snap turnaround and then you can run forward instead of just allowing you to turn quickly.
To move around. Yeah.
They gave this weird ass pivot system when if they knew that you were going to have to do that, they give you a half-ass solution instead of just going, you look around with C stick or right stick and you strafe around with left stick. Problem solved.
That would probably make more sense. I mean, I know you guys had problems with the old Resident Evil games with the the tank controls.
Mm-hmm.
Matt and I never really had an issue, so when it came to general control, it did feel a bit clunky, but it wasn't really like a deal breaker for me or anything.
It feels out of place. I don't know why knife is hold a trigger and then attack. Like, they could have had a switch. They could have just done a switch button. They could have had a, you have your melee attack, or you have whatever primary weapon you have selected out of your inventory. I can understand, like, yeah, you can only have one weapon out at a time, and you can only have one primary weapon, because entering your inventory and switching what you're going to be wielding only takes a second, and it pauses the game.
Right.
Not a problem. I'm not demanding a weapon wheel here, but it could have been very simply Y switches between some knife and gun,
Or even just have L switch to the knife.
Yeah, very simple. I don't know why reload, you have to be hard aiming to reload.
I get that. I mean, I do think that
It seems
probably
so
convenient to have a
unnecessary.
trick for it. Yeah, I mean, the knife is a really commonly used weapon in that game.
It is. So
So
they made it awkward to use.
Yeah.
And my final complaint, and this got me killed 3 times in the first chapter, was you roll up on a dude, you shoot him in the leg, and then you roundhouse kick him. The second dude walks up, you shoot him in the leg, and then instead of a roundhouse kick prompt, I loot the body. And the dude grabs me, or he hits me with, his pitchfork or axe or whatever he's wielding at the time. And that got me killed a lot.
I can see how it would be an issue, though, because it is the same button, but
I
never had an issue with it, but I can see how it would be a problem.
I disliked, another thing that was frustrating was, when you pull out your weapon, you suddenly can't move, and your controls, which were tanky before, are now a proper free look control on the left stick. And that was really frustrating with the knife, because I'd want to inch forward, instead I'd look up or look down.
Yeah.
Depending on what I'm trying to do. And it was just, I can't tell if it was on purpose
I'm sure it was.
that they did this, or if
they
it was
did.
just laziness.
Well, I think they wanted the tank control scheme from the original games and carry that over in this 3D action game. So I think it's just more of a carry-on from the older games, to be honest.
Now, that being said, because I just bitched a lot about this, and I tend to bitch a lot about Resident Evil, it seems, is the aesthetic of the game and the atmosphere, as usual, is very appealing.
Yeah.
I liked it, especially since it's kind of silly and over the top.
It is.
Like, you get into a tussle, a guy grapples you, and you might have shot him once or twice already, but then he gets the grapple, and you kick his head off. You jump out of a top story window, and you just don't jump down and roll when you hit the ground. You do a fucking flip.
Yeah, but then there's like one scene where this dude's giving his evil talk, and then you just get bored and throw a fucking knife into his hand. It's a shame. And he's like, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah, and when you do your leg sweep kills, like, yeah, you shoot him in the leg. You don't like stab him as a fancy kill. They could have done something very reasonable. No, you just go
Suplex.
full Chuck Norris, or yeah, you can just, when they're on the ground, you can do a suplex, or it's like, what is going on here? This seems so out of place, but that's fun.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I like about the Resident Evil series, is that it is kind of silly while still being horror. I mean, like, obviously one of the big things that people remember in terms of silliness is, like in Resident Evil 5, where in order to get rid of a boulder, Chris Redfield just fucking punches it, which is like the stupidest thing, but it's so Resident Evil, and I love it.
Oh, speaking of boulders, my last
Running
gripe,
away.
I know what you're gonna
gripe
say.
about the game, QuickTime events.
Yeah.
I hate them. I hate them with a passion. It's
They're
like
not
one
bad,
of my
but they just keep fucking changing them. It's just like, oh, I died from the boulder. Right, let's do it again. Oh, you've changed the fucking buttons on me. What the hell?
Yeah.
It's literally my least favorite video game mechanic. And when they threw that in there, I was like, well, shit, I'm over this now.
Matt, I think I'm possibly wrong in this, but you'll know for sure. Isn't Resident Evil 4 like one of the first games to introduce QuickTime mechanics during like actual gameplay? I mean, obviously you've got stuff like Dragon's Lair, which was a game about just quick time events. But as a game where it's a normal game with just random shit thrown in cutscenes, am I right? in thinking that Resident Evil either popularized it or created it.
It's the first one that I can think of that actually had the prompts up.
Oh,
I'm
no,
not
wait,
sure if
Die
it was
Hard
like the very
Arcade.
first one.
Die Hard Arcade was before, right?
Yeah, it was certainly before that.
Yeah, it
So
was
I
a Saturn
think
game, so it
probably
would have been.
popularized it. I think after Resident Evil 4, it appeared in like every other game after.
Yeah.
So I think he probably just popularized it. Come to think of it.
Yeah, and they really caught me off guard because they did that, and then the second chapter hits, and the cutscene ends with a QuickTime event, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't even holding my controller. I'm watching a cutscene.
Yeah.
Actually, that was one of the things that killed me most often, to be honest, is that it would be a cutscene, and then I'd put my controller down and take like a rest, and then suddenly a QuickTime event appeared, and before I could grab the controller, I was dead.
You're dead.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
Because
It's so unnecessary.
I mean, that's one of the things that, kind of brings me on to, is that's one of my main gripes about the game, is that it's constant. Like, there's no, kind of real rest. In the older Resident Evil games, you had these moments where the monsters were attacking you, but a lot of the time you've got time to kind of compose yourself and tension builds up a bit more, while you're waiting for the next encounter. But Resident Evil 4 is just set piece after set piece after set piece. There's very little downtime, especially from like the second area onwards. You do have like a little bit in the village, but like from the castle, it's pretty much like constantly in your face. It's like, okay, I'm done with this. Then you'll walk through the door and it's like, okay, it's this part. Now I've got to, take out all these guys that are firing bows at me. Or now there's a rocket launch dude. Or now it's the bit where I've got to, do whatever. It's like there's no real break. And that's why the QuickTime events in cutscenes would throw me off guard, is that I get to a cutscene and I'd think, right, okay, time for a break. And then I'd die.
See, and that's another reason why, because it's like, yeah, we're doing overrated games here. I know that Resident Evil 4 is overrated. I don't know why it gets such a high rating, not because of my issues with mechanics, because like you just kind of float along with it. It didn't really bother you. For me, I never really got into Resident Evil back in the day, so coming back into this, me used to more modern control schemes, more modern layouts, it's a very big step backwards, and it frustrates me to no end. And I can sit back and go, I could have thought about a fix for this, because it's not like third person and first person wasn't a thing, and twin stick wasn't a thing until Resident Evil came up with it. It's just that they made odd decisions for whatever was going on in their brain. But this marked a really hard shift in the Resident Evil style. And obviously it's when it went to an over-the-shoulder. It was the first to do that. It marked an actual tone change where it is much more action-based. Games like Silent Hill and the first Resident Evils had you conserving ammo a bit more. They just shower you with it.
Yeah.
They do, but not until later. Like, earlier on in the game, like in the village, I find that you kind of have to conserve your ammo quite a fair bit more.
Oh, no, I finished up the first, I finished the first chapter with like 60 rounds of ammunition. I didn't even touch the shotgun.
Really? Maybe I just got unlucky in my last playthrough because, I kept getting like money drops. I very rarely get ammo drops. So I found that a lot of the time I'd just do suplexes and stab people just to save ammo.
Like, they definitely are stingy on the health, which is always tense when you're running around with only a few hit points, but it's like, man, there's so much ammo, I can just blow everybody's head off.
Well, and one of the things about that first village encounter, the way I got through it was there's a point you can get to where you bottleneck them and they all have to come at you from this one direction.
Mm-hmm.
And basically there's a peaked roof at the end of it, so I was able to go to the other side of that peak and then just sit there with the knife and slash as they hit the peak. They would swing over my head and I just I took out like half the village just swinging my knife at them from that position.
Oh no,
yeah, there's loads of ways to cheese that first section.
That first section, I literally ran back because the dudes spawn back at the door that you show up in, or that you run back and you take care of them really, really quick. And by that time, the entire village basically bottleneck in that little street or trail.
Yeah.
and you can just throw your grenade.
Yeah.
Because they give you another grenade like 30 seconds later, and you can literally kill almost every single one of them with one grenade throw. So yeah, it's not really an issue there.
Yeah.
Again,
what
they just
the actual
shower you with
areas of
weapons.
the game? Like, I mean, there are three main areas in the game: the village, the castle, and the island. What's your opinion on those three? I mean, obviously, Stephen, you've only played the village, but
Yeah.
I mean, like, Ryan and Matt, what do you think to like the three main areas?
Oh, I didn't finish this game. I got mad.
How far did you get?
I think I might have beat chapter 2 and gotten to chapter 3. I don't recall.
Oh,
I was too upset by then.
Okay, so Matt, then I suppose.
The first area is nice. It's a little bit brown, but I like the gritty feel of it,
I don't know if
like
you
the
can just
kind
say
of
that,
like
Matt.
rural feel. It has more of a horror aspect for me, having that kind of like rural feel with the villagers and stuff like that. My favorite section would be the castle section, just because I like really gothic, ornate buildings like that, which are kind of like a staple of the Resident Evil series. The island, it was my least favorite section of the game, and in terms of area, it was the least inspired looking. It's just a lot of sand and ruins and that really annoying underground sand bit. But yeah, the castle would probably be my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I think the village is a bit boring for me, but it's kind of in peaks and troughs. There's some bits which are quite good, and then other bits are a bit kind of meh. Like the castle, I find the best again, like you, even though like some of the rooms are like some of the most stressful in the game. Like that big open one where you eventually have to protect Ashley as she's turning cranks.
Yeah, and you got to sniper all them guys. Like,
Yeah, because you go into the room and there's tons of them about, and then you've got to go into this bottom room and press these two switches to activate the bridge, and then you have to protect her. That room in particular is just really stressful to do, and I hate it every time. But like the island is just like the whole thing is just stress from like
yeah, it's just like SWAT
ridiculously
teams
strong
and shit.
enemies to like the regenerators and stuff. It's like the whole thing is just designed to stress you out. I mean, it's got some really cool bits. Like some of the boss fights in that final area are really good. Like the It's boss fight is, really cool despite being ridiculously hard. As you're going through like this, not necessarily train. I think it's like big shipping crates or something like that, or I don't know what is it that you're fighting on.
I think it is like shipping crates. They're like on chains and
Because I think it's like
Yeah.
cages with shipping crates inside that you have to navigate you through, and they're kind of dropping off, and you're going through these tight areas with this creature attacking you, and it's really good. It's hard, but it's good. But yeah, I find like the areas can be a bit kind of hit and miss, and it's only really the castle area that I like quite a lot. I definitely had a lot more fun with it this time than I have done, but as I say, I find the constant set piece after set piece after set piece just kind of tiring, or not tiring, but exhausting. I just feel like I play it for, maybe half an hour or so, and I have to take a break just because it's just too much of like all this kind of really stressful shit, again and again and again, because it's one sequence after another. And I think that's the main flaw with Resident Evil 4 for me, is that it doesn't really have much in terms of downtime, so it just feels a bit too much in places.
Well, it actually would have had a lot more action in it initially, because the initial version of the game, which they eventually scrapped, was what turned into Devil May Cry, which is like all 100% out and out action. So you can see how it was originally going to be. They decided that it wasn't right for Resident Evil series, and they retooled it into Devil May Cry. But
it's not necessarily the action and stuff, because like Devil May Cry, I don't necessarily have a problem with because of the style of game. It's not survival horror, whereas every hit does like a big chunk of damage, so you've got to basically take care not to get hit. You've got to preserve supplies. So juggling all that with action, tank controls, and then some kind of trickier sequences like sniping bits or boss encounters or what have you, makes it a lot more of a stressful experience than something that's a straight out brawler like Devil May Cry.
Devil May Cry, my favorite Resident Evil game.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think Resident Evil 4 is that bad. I used to love this as a child, but then the more I play, the more I seem to go off it. It's interesting though, because I played it on the Xbox 360 and I didn't have a good time when it came out on the XBLA. I got to a point where I was just fed up with it. But then when I replayed it for the podcast, I actually enjoyed it more than I have done for a very long time. I still don't think it's anywhere near as good as the critical acclaim it receives, and I still think it has a lot of problems, but I still think it's an enjoyable game. It's nowhere near my favourite Resident Evil game, but it's still decent.
In terms of the over-the-shoulder ones, I think it's the best of them, closely followed by Revelations.
I think Revelations 1 and Resident Evil 5 are better than 4, personally. That may be a bit controversial.
I don't like 5.
You see, apart from like the stupid AI, I think it's a really good game. Like, I think it's not got any horror, more or less. It's pretty much just straight out silly action game. But I think it's really solid. I think that, if anything's underrated. Like, a lot of people slate that game, and really, apart from the co-op AI, it's a pretty damn good game in my opinion.
The thing is, though, you can't turn the co-op AI off. You can't just go around on your own. It's like every 5 minutes, like Shiva's dying, and you've got to kind of like give her ammo and healing. And
I never get that of her dying or anything. I just find that she ends up taking all the shit that I want instead. That can get a little bit annoying. She's one of those greedy AI partners. I mean, the game is definitely better with a human player, but I think the co-op AI is not that bad. But maybe that's just me. But either way, I still think Resident Evil 4 is pretty solid.
yeah, I really enjoy it.
I personally prefer it to Ocarina of Time if I was to compare the two. I think Resident Evil 4 is the better game, but I definitely think both have a, like this kind of perfect reputation that neither of which deserve. I think neither are nowhere close to perfect, but they're both decent to varying degrees.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say either one of them is a bad game. I know I didn't see all of Resident Evil 4, but I could see that like the core of a good game was there, and once you get into the flow, it doesn't feel as bad. I know there are some issues to be had with that, but I am willing to overlook some of that because it's making a third-person shooter on the GameCube. If I remember correctly, it was the first one, and even if it wasn't, that was not a great system for building that kind of thing on.
I can agree with you to a certain point, but I really feel like the clunkiness was intentional to enforce the tension of the game.
Mm-hmm.
There were smarter, less lazy ways to do it, and honestly, I think if the control scheme was better, like I think if this game was set up as a proper two-stick over-the-shoulder with reasonable controls and not weird roundabout ways to do things that you have to do all the time, I would thoroughly enjoy Resident Evil 4. But as it is, it's such a bizarre situation. I can't enjoy it. Mega Man Legends did the same exact thing to me, where it has everything it needs to be a great game, but Mega Man Legends has you running around and you turn with L and R. And for the life of me, I don't know why. It's tank controls and you turn left and right with the L and R buttons. And there's no fucking reason for it. They could have just done a proper 3D run around like Mario.
That's ridiculous.
It's really bad and it ruins the game.
I think that with Resident Evil 4, the controls and the clunkiness was intentional. I certainly remember at that time that people had this view that survival horror games had to have that kind of clunkiness, and fighting the mechanics of the game was part of the things that increase the tension, which obviously now people have realised that that's not a thing and you can do it while still being, a playable game.
It's just like
always.
It's
but
like,
I think it was just that they probably had that idea in their head that they wanted horror, so it had to be clunky, but they also wanted this action game.
It's like this dude is supposed to be like ex-police and special forces or whatever, but when you're running, he has the urgency of a lethargic man in a buffet. It's like...
Well, yeah.
To be fair, he was only a policeman for one day.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Yeah. But then you've got things like, moving away from retro for a moment, you've got things like Breath of the Wild. You've got like this fucking guy that can climb massive mountains with his bare hands.
But he can only run for 2
sprint for like
seconds.
5 seconds. And it's like, what? Sometimes it can be a bit weird, games. But yeah, I mean, I say, going back to what I originally said, I don't think overrated necessarily means bad. Like, neither of these games are anywhere close to bad games. They're both good games to varying degrees. It's just that, are they near perfect games? Which, I mean, both these games get near perfect praise across the board by people. I don't think they're near perfect games.
No.
I don't think they're close to near perfect. But they're still pretty good. I mean, like, I enjoyed Resident Evil 4, and I've played Ocarina of Time countless times, so I still enjoyed that to a varying degree, I suppose. So both are good games, but they're not perfect.
We didn't actually mention the best thing about Resident Evil 4.
The merchant,
What are you buying?
yeah, he's kind of, I'll buy it at a high price.
He doesn't try and cheat you or anything. You know, he gives you good prices for stuff.
He does. And he's quite good, because even if you shoot him in the head, he doesn't hold it against you next time. He'll just reappear, and he'll be like, here you go.
But I really like the merchant. I mean, nothing is ever explained about him. He's just there, and he just sells you stuff.
He's basically just there as a gameplay device to sell you stuff. And that's literally all he's there for.
Out of curiosity,
It
what-
makes no sense, because he is a monster, you can tell by his eyes, so he is infected, and yet he has no desire of attacking you. He can't be controlled by Sadler either, which is interesting, because the others attack you because they're, in control. Sadler's in control of them. But the merchant, he's strong enough to fight against it and do his own thing, and his own thing is selling shit.
Now all I can think of is the Phantom Menace. It's like, oh, you're trying to use your Jedi mind tricks on me? I'm a Targaryen. Only money.
Exactly. So capitalism is the only thing stronger than mind control.
Thanks,
It
Watto.
seems. But yeah, it's stupid as a merchant and doesn't make like any real sense, but I'm glad he's in there. He's cool.
Yeah.
Right, so does anyone have any noticeable overrated games they want to mention before we close up? I think we've covered our 2 main games, but I think we've also included quite a few other games as well that we think may be overrated in our opinion.
I've got one for my end segment.
Alright. And Mega Man X, of course.
I'll fight
That's-
you.
I only said that to annoy you.
I know.
Right, okay, well, we'll have a break and we'll go into our fun game segments. See you after the jump.
Got a selection of good things on sale, stranger.
Now we're going to get into our specialty subjects, and my Doom mod of the month is one that we have actually discussed previously a couple of months back, but we're going to go back to it. It's Sigil, because when I was looking at the highest rated Doom mods, Sigil was up there. I've seen reviews of it. People have said like it's really, really good, and I just really didn't enjoy it. Honestly, I thought the difficulty was too much. I didn't really like the level design of it. And, from one of the original game designers, I just expected kind of like a better experience. Even though in the original couple of games, John Romero's levels aren't the best levels. I mean, generally you get better levels from American McGee, John Carmack. But I did expect something that was going to be really, really top-notch quality. And it just didn't really do anything for me. But a lot of people do really, really like it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you about Sigil. I only played like a little bit and watched a little bit more, and I think aesthetically it looks really nice. I mean, they use the normal Doom assets, and they made it have a really good look, but the design is just I mean, those tiny thin platforms and stuff you have to go on, and
Yeah.
it's like, this is fucking Doom, not fucking Super Monkey Ball.
I mean, you do have that one tightrope level in the original Doom. In fact, no, it's Doom 2.
And nobody
Which-
likes that level either.
Yeah, it is. It is just horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things which I think works fine in Doom 2, because it's something that's a bit different from, monster corridors and stuff, and it's just something different. It's like, okay, we've had these kind of levels, now we're going to throw something a bit different. So it breaks up the pace a little bit. So I think, even though it's not a great level, or even a good level, it does break the pace up, and it's fine for a one-off. But doing more of them in, Sigil.
Yeah, especially with Lost Souls coming in at the time as well.
Yeah, they are pretty shit, Lost Souls. And so is Sigil by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Alright, well, for my segment, in my Pokemon segment, my overrated Pokemon game will be Pokemon Go. Now, Pokemon Go does get like a lot of flack from a lot of people, but it's still like wildly popular. Like the amount of people playing is ridiculous, and it's the most amount of money that, the Pokemon company have ever made from a Pokemon game or Pokemon application, I suppose. So it's wildly popular and people still play it to this day. But it's not very good. So it was released
2016.
I want to say.
7/7/2016.
That's interesting because it always seems like it's not actually that old. Like
Right.
I always want to say 2017 maybe, but it's 2016. Sure. So yeah, people still play it. I mean, I think there are still like hundreds of millions of people that still play it, like maybe 100 million people every month that are still active.
Yeah.
And it's got like, what, billions and billions of money.
I mean, I just saw a headline of shit. I think this was in the UK that it happened too. Some dude got pulled over and he had
He was playing like 50 Pokemon
Eight.
Go.
Yeah,
at the same time.
Eight phones.
phones. He was playing the Pokemon Go on 8 phones in his car.
But have you seen the Japanese guy? He's got like some kind of harness device with like all these phones in front of him. People get really into it. I mean, the basis of the game. I mean, the starting trailer. Let's go back to the original trailer. The original trailer, it showed some people going around the city and they were catching Pokemon in the real life. So the whole kind of idea was it'd be augmented reality and that Pokemon would exist in your world and you'd capture them. And so people will be like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then it gets released and it's basically just standard AR. If you've ever used an AR application, you show your camera in a place and there's a thing that pops up. So these are places that are placed there by like a satellite or whatever. And you need to go and search for them. You find it and then you flick like a Pokeball like button on your screen and you may or may not capture them. And then obviously you capture more of them to fill up your Pokedex. You capture more of the same and you can get them stronger, etc., etc.
I would say, do we want to talk about the original trailer, which was the Google April Fool's joke in 2014?
Oh, I didn't actually see that.
Okay, so a lot of the original launch trailer for Pokemon Go was ripped right from Google's April Fool's joke in 2014, which was basically like they pitched the idea of Pokemon Go as an April Fool's joke. And then they said, hang on, we could actually do this.
All right, that's interesting. To be fair, like the concept is something that it definitely captured people's imagination.
Yeah.
Pokemon is like the biggest thing in the world. So, obviously having this thing where it's like, okay, with your phones, you can capture Pokemon in your own world. And it's going to be this free-to-play application. I mean, the idea is good, but mechanically it's a bit shit. In terms of, like, functionality, I've had a lot of problems. Like, a lot of the time it crashes, and, like, I'll capture a Pokemon and then it'll freeze and then it won't happen. Sometimes I'll be traveling, like, way too fast. I'm just sat on the toilet.
Yeah.
It seems to go all over the place. And, they didn't even have things like trading and... Well, have they got trading now?
Yes.
I know they've added battling.
Yes.
Okay, so they've added trading and battling later, but like fucking years later. Which, battling is like one of the main things you do with Pokemon. And they didn't add it till like years later.
Yeah, and what I will say is when the game first came out and I tried it out, it just made me want to play the other Pokemon games. It just made me want to play the original games. I mean, I play it now, but it's a much more casual thing where like occasionally I'll, go out and do a thing, or I'll just, open it up while I'm sitting somewhere.
I mean, as like a little app for Pokemon, I think it's fine. I think mechanically it's a bit wonky, but it's probably more to do with like the demand on the servers maybe, because there's a lot of people playing it, I imagine. Like, I know that they had a lot of server stress at the start.
Oh, yeah.
Because they didn't realise that, a free-to-play thing based on Pokemon wouldn't be popular. Yeah, which was weird. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's fine as a thing. It's fine as an application, and it's all right. But people, that are really addicted to it and consider it like this massive thing. Yeah, I consider it overrated in that regard. And I also think it's overrated in the sense of I think this is going to ruin Pokemon as a franchise. It's making Game Freak a hell of a lot of money, and as we've seen recently, Game Freak they've got Pokemon Masters coming out. There's Pokemon Home, which is going to be mobile based as well. Pokemon Sleep. They're releasing more mobile based Pokemon applications, and then there's the console game. First mainline console game, and there's been a lot of criticism for how janky it looks. Like some of the textures are a bit iffy, the animations are the same as they've been since like the DS era. And it still looks fun, it still looks like Pokemon, but considering like Pokemon's the biggest franchise ever, it seems like Game Freak haven't been given much of a budget by the Pokemon company to work with. And it seems like Game Freak are focusing their attentions now on mobile.
Well, it's weird too, because this is just a fad.
It's just a fad, yeah.
And here's the thing: Game Freak didn't develop Pokemon Go.
No, they didn't. I mean, that's not by Game Freak. It was Niantic. But I'd say like the Pokemon company, which gets all the money, will be giving the budget to like Game Freak or Niantic or whatever. And it seems like Game Freak's money is being focused more towards the mobile games. So getting the mobile companies making the mobile stuff. And then it's like they've said to Game Freak, okay, yeah, you can make Gen 8. Here's a tiny bit of cash. So it's like they haven't given them much to work with. Because like all the problems, I think that if they had more of a budget, they could probably deal with it. And I think Game Freak know this. They seem to be focusing their efforts more on Town than Pokemon. Like if you look at Town, for example, graphically it's beautiful. And then you look at Pokemon Sword and Shield, and it looks like, like a last gen game, at best. And it's disappointing. It kind of feels like things may be going slightly south and maybe veering towards the mobile market. I mean, that's not a reason why I dislike Pokemon Go. I dislike Pokemon Go because it's not functional for me, and it's a bit basic even when it is functional.
Right.
But I do think as well that Pokemon Go is probably going to trigger the start of the end for at least the mainline games, or at least the mainline games as we know it.
Fair enough.
And also as well, Pokemon Go have done some crazy things. From having like that event where, nothing worked, to like having Pokemon available in things like Auschwitz, which was iffy.
Oof.
But like as well, they put some stuff in real awkward places. Like I remember hearing things from like railway companies as well, like people going on like the railway tracks and stuff to capture Pokemon.
Yeah.
And then like outside public surfaces, like hospitals and fire stations, so they couldn't get to where they needed because there were crowds of people playing fucking Pokemon.
Yeah.
And then I think someone got shot dead or something, because I think they were like, I seem to remember someone trespassed in an area and got shot because they're trying to capture a Pokemon. And so you got people getting hit by cars. I mean, obviously all these are people's stupidity, but some of them are just like really oddly placed Pokemon.
Well, that's what happens.
Yeah. But either way, I'm not a massive fan of Pokemon Go, but it's like the most successful Pokemon thing ever, it seems.
I still play it.
I mean, I say it's okay, it's fine as like a Pokemon app. I think it's functional enough and it's alright, but it's not, considering like it's 3 years later and it's still played by millions and millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. It's got a popularity that's real crazy.
For me, it does help that I do have a gym accessible from my house.
Lucky.
That's handy.
When I first started playing it, I didn't have Pokemon accessible from my house because I live in a rural, away from anything.
I've got a gym accessible from my house as well, but it's not Pokemon gym, it's an actual gym, so I don't go there.
Ah, see what you did there.
Exactly.
All right, so mine, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but the one I'm going to talk about is Final Fantasy VII, because I've played through the game recently, and it, like we said before, it's another one of those that is held up as, oh, it's one of the best games ever. It's a ton of people's favorite Final Fantasy. And I'm here to say it is not a bad game. It is actually a very good game. Like, it's still very enjoyable. But there have been better Final Fantasies. And, I think a combination of it being the first one for a lot of people, it going with a more sci-fi aesthetic for a change of pace, and just like, a lot of the good elements push that, people's nostalgia for it through the roof. But, other games told better stories. Other games had more fun mechanics. Like, it's a good game. It's a very good game. It has one of my favorite side quests ever in the Chocobos. But at the end of the day, it is not as good as some of the other games in the series. And it's definitely not one of the best games of all time.
I would also like to add that everybody in Final Fantasy VII is angsty as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, real bad. And that's just... If you're going to have an angsty character, fine. But when it's like 3 or 4 of them, it just becomes a lot of, oof, this is a little much.
Yeah. It's one of the ones that's been re-released the most. It's got a ton of ports. They're doing a full-on remake, which is something fans have been demanding for a while.
And they're gonna hate it.
And that's the thing, is like, the thing people don't understand about that is it is not the Squaresoft of 1997 making the Final Fantasy VII remake. It is the Square Enix of it was announced like 4 years ago, but it's the modern Square Enix that's making it, not old Squaresoft.
Well, shit, they teased it at this point like over 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's one of those games that I do really enjoy. I think it's great. It's got, a lot of good moments in it, and it still holds up. But it's just not... It's not as good as people say it is.
Well, no, and that's what's strange about it, is because, like, Final Fantasy VI is better.
Yes.
Final Fantasy VIII is better. I don't know a single person who dislikes Final Fantasy X.
I dislike it.
Well,
you don't count because you dislike all of them.
That's true.
But a lot of people, like, they just love 10 and 10-2, and it got the 10 and 10-2
the
remake.
remaster.
The remasters was just like, it was a huge deal because people were like, oh my god, the game is so good.
Yeah.
And I'm not even big on RPGs, but, I can recognize this, and it's just like, yeah, no, Square Enix has a very highly rated scabbard of Final Fantasy games, and it's weird that Final Fantasy VII is held so high. Like, it got a sequel in the form of a movie.
Yeah. It had the sequel movie, the prequel game, and then another sequel game that took place after the movie.
It's crazy how much it... And then there was like a little animated miniseries that went along with it too, to prequel a lot that went on before. Like, there's just so much that revolves around Final Fantasy VII. It's not even... I won't say it's bad, but it's just a relatively straightforward Final Fantasy game. It's not special.
I mean, it is special. Like, it is still,
okay,
up there.
It's special, and it's special in the way that it was the first, like, fully 3D proper.
And that it went for the more sci-fi, cyberpunk aesthetic than... Because
before they were all, like, high fantasy. Well, right. I don't know. Final Fantasy VI had mechs in it. It literally opens up with mechs.
Well, I mean, they all had airships, so they all had that steampunk element.
Yeah.
This is the first one that went full on...
This one, like, dystopian future cyberpunk.
Yeah. So, that change of pace was a big deal, but it also still, like, it's not as good as some of the others. I mean, when you talk to people within the Final Fantasy community, 9 is more highly regarded than this one. And, like, you look at Metacritic, 9 is sitting at 94 and 7 is at 92. Final Fantasy X was one of the best received games ever at the time, because it went to the fully realized 3D graphics, the fully voiced, the whole 9 yards. 7 was a good benchmark. It was, it is up there as one of the better ones, but it is not the best game of all time, like a lot of people say it is.
No, yeah, definitely not. And people will gush over 7, and I can't give it gush points. I can be like, yeah, it's fun, but like, oof.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, you can be like, way that some people will go after 7. It's like, you need to change your underpants after that one because,
Right?
yeah, it's not that good, man. Music's pretty solid, though. I will give it that.
Oh yeah, the music is fantastic.
But that's kind of true for most Final Fantasy games. Like, they definitely nail that every single time.
Yeah, most of them have great music. It's just like one of the things you can always count on.
Mm-hmm. It's like a Zelda game. A Zelda game's always going to have good music.
Yeah.
And unlike Nintendo, Square have actually put all these soundtracks up on streaming services.
Because
Yes,
they're
they have.
smart and they like money. I would definitely say that. 7, I did say it earlier that 7 is overrated, but it's not a bad game. Unless you ask Adam. Hey, Adam, is Final
Yeah.
Fantasy 7 a bad game?
Yep.
Oh, see, I was right. 3 points for me.
I played through it recently. Actually did it in about half the time that it normally takes, which was interesting. It's still fun. It's just one of those that people gush over way more than is necessary.
And in reality, it's more of it's a game.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that aren't a game, go on, Ryan. Your console.
Speaking of things that aren't a game, well, it was kind of hard to find a console that is obscure and also overrated, but I did find it.
Is it the Dreamcast?
No. Although, actually, I think about it, well, the Dreamcast's not obscure. That's the whole thing. I'm trying to go for more obscure consoles. Dreamcast is definitely overrated, even though I do like the console. Don't like the controller, like the console. No, it's the 3DO interactive multiplayer. And I didn't realize it was overrated until I started looking up, and right there in the first or the second paragraph of the wiki, Time Magazine labeled it as 1993 Product of the Year. Keep in mind, it died in 1996. It didn't last long. I don't even think it properly launched until 1994. And it was a very powerful console, but what's extra weird about it is that it wasn't just a single console. It was actually more of a hardware layout that a lot of people made. Panasonic and Sanyo made several of them. Gold Star ended up making them near the end of the life. And they were all slightly different, but they could all play the same games. Mostly what killed it was the fact that it was $699 in 1995.
Jesus Christ.
Which is nearly a $1,200 console when you adjust for inflation. Literally as expensive as PCs, like high-end PCs at the time.
Oof.
But what was cool about it, I guess, and which is why I was getting like rave reviews, from critics before it was actually released, was it played games that other consoles straight up couldn't. It was a powerhouse. It was delivering lots of arcade level performance. And it was supposed to compete with the likes of the Saturn. And it was outclassing it. But it's 1995. It was an oversaturated market with PlayStation entering the field, the Saturn in the field, Nintendo 64. Other people were trying to hop in at the same time. And it was just too expensive, and everyone else was way more competitive with their prices. Nintendo was selling the N64 for $200. The Saturn was $300 or $400. The PlayStation came in super competitively priced. And on top of that, because it wasn't a single unified platform, I'm only assuming that didn't help this thing. And it came in. It had a lot of had a lot of grandeur entering it. It was praised. There was a big push for it. It was everything it was claimed to be, and it just died. And that's the life of the 3DO.
It's one of the few retro consoles I've never actually owned.
Yeah, and last I checked, these things are really expensive to get now. Like they aren't cheap to start collecting for. But that's pretty much all I got on that. It was all I could really find to maybe theme in.
All right, nice one. Thanks all for that, Ryan. Interesting as always. I don't think I've heard of that.
I mean, it didn't last long.
Well, neither did the Saturn.
Poor thing never knew it hit it.
Exactly.
It was Sega.
Exactly. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're going to pass over to Matt, and he's got a little bit of an exciting competition for you all.
Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about Resident Evil 4, and we are going to be running a competition this month to win a steelbook copy of the limited edition PlayStation 2 release of Resident Evil 4, which comes with a nice steelbook case and a guidebook which acts as kind of like a player's guide for the first couple sections of the game. And it's a really nicely presented package. So what you have to do, if you head on over to our Facebook page, you will see the competition link on there and enter the competition through that. And if you win, then we will send this out to you worldwide. Bear in mind that this will be a PAL version of the game. So just make sure if you are outside of Europe that your system can actually play it. But if it can, enter the competition, you might just win. So good luck.
Nice one. Well, good luck, everybody. And next month's podcast, we'll announce the winner. So we'll see you then, and all that's left is to say goodbye from me and goodbye from everyone else. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Got something that might interest you.